The moment I connected all these scenes, I couldn't stop thinking about one question. What if we've all been looking at Wanda Maximoff's powers the wrong way? What if, back in Avengers, Age of Ultron, she wasn't simply creating terrifying hallucinations for the Avengers? What if every single vision she showed them was something much bigger, something connected to destiny itself? And if that's true, then maybe the biggest vision of all is one that Marvel hasn't paid off yet. Let's start with Steve Rogers, because this is where the entire idea begins. When Wanda reaches into Steve's mind in Age of Ultron, she doesn't simply show him a random dream. She shows him a peaceful dance with Peggy Carter. At first glance, it feels like an emotional trick. She is simply exploiting the one life Steve always wished he could have lived. But years later, something incredible happens. At the end of Avengers Endgame, Steve chooses to return the Infinity Stones, travels back in time, and finally spends an entire lifetime with Peggy. The scene we once thought was only a nightmare suddenly feels strangely prophetic. Whether it was fate or coincidence, Wanda's vision ended up resembling Steve's real future in an unexpected way. Then there's Thor. His vision confused almost everyone when Age of Ultron first came out. We watched him witness terrifying images connected to Asgard, destruction, and chaos. At the time, nobody knew exactly what Marvel was building toward, but several years later, Thor Ragnarok arrived and Asgard was destroyed. Suddenly, that strange sequence from Age of Ultron looked very different. Once again, Wanda's vision seemed to echo a future event that hadn't happened yet. Maybe she wasn't creating random fears after all. Maybe she was touching moments that were waiting somewhere ahead on the timeline. Natasha Romanoff's vision is another fascinating example. She sees flashes of the Red Room, her brutal childhood, and the life she never escaped. Back then, audiences only understood pieces of what those memories meant. Later, the Black Widow film expanded her entire history, revealing many of the same emotional scars that Wanda's powers had already shown us years before. Looking back, every one of these visions feels connected by a single pattern. Steve's future aligned with reality. Thor's future aligned with reality. Natasha's hidden past was eventually revealed in full. So naturally, my attention shifts toward the one vision that still feels unfinished. Tony Stark's vision has always stood out to me because it refuses to fit neatly into the explanation many fans accept. Tony sees a devastated battlefield. Around him, the Avengers appear defeated. Captain America looks at him and says one heartbreaking line, "You could have saved us." Most people connect that scene directly to Avengers Infinity War, arguing that it foreshadowed Tony's failure against Thanos. That's a perfectly reasonable interpretation, but I keep running into one problem. The battlefield doesn't completely match. Steve isn't standing beside Tony on Titan. Every Avenger isn't lying there together. The emotional tone also feels different. It's almost as if the vision is pointing toward another battle entirely, one that still exists somewhere beyond the stories we've already seen. So here's where my imagination starts filling in the blanks. What if that battlefield isn't Titan at all? What if it's Battle World, the legendary setting many comic readers know as a place where impossible realities collide? Imagine a world created from broken universes where heroes from countless timelines struggle to survive. Suddenly, Tony's vision begins to feel much larger than a single fight against Thanos. Maybe Captain America's words weren't simply about defeating one villain. Maybe they represented the burden Tony always carried, the impossible responsibility of saving everyone, no matter the cost. Whether that future ever appears on screen or not, the emotional connection is fascinating to explore. Now let's take the biggest leap into pure fan speculation. What if Tony's sacrifice at the end of Endgame wasn't the absolute end of his story? The film shows us his final moments, and emotionally, it works beautifully. But Marvel has always loved exploring unusual ideas involving alternate realities, variants, magic, and cosmic forces. So imagine, purely as a fictional possibility, that Tony's legacy continued in a way nobody expected. Not because he secretly survived, but because some deeper part of him, his influence, his identity, or perhaps even a version of him from another reality, continued to exist somewhere beyond what we witness. It's a huge what if. But those are exactly the kinds of questions that make fan theories entertaining. That possibility becomes even more interesting whenever fans discuss Doctor Doom's eventual arrival in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For years, viewers have wondered how Marvel might introduce one of its greatest villains into a saga already filled with multiversal chaos. My theory doesn't claim to know the answer. Instead, it imagines an emotionally devastating twist. Suppose a Doom-like figure carried echoes of Tony Stark, not necessarily because he literally became Doctor Doom, but because the story wanted to challenge the Avengers with someone who reminded them of the greatest hero they ever lost. Imagine how Peter Parker, Pepper Potts, Rhodey, or even Sam Wilson would react if they faced someone whose face or presence brought back memories of Tony. The emotional conflict alone would be unforgettable. And then we arrive at Wanda Maximoff herself. This is where everything comes together. Wanda possesses reality-warping abilities unlike almost anyone else in the MCU. Across multiple films and series, we've seen her alter minds, reshape reality, and influence entire worlds. My fan theory imagines that her powers have always been affecting destiny in subtle ways, even before she fully understood them. Maybe those visions in Age of Ultron weren't simply windows into the future. Maybe they were moments where countless possible futures briefly intersected. By showing each Avenger one path, she unknowingly nudged them toward choices they were already capable of making. Steve embraced love. Thor accepted sacrifice. Natasha confronted her past. Tony accepted responsibility. Not because Wanda forced them, but because the visions became emotional turning points in their journeys. That idea transforms every major decision Tony makes afterward. He creates Ultron because he fears another invasion. He refuses to stop searching for solutions after every failure. He invents time travel because he refuses to accept defeat. Finally, he sacrifices himself because protecting others has always mattered more than protecting himself. None of these choices need supernatural manipulation, but viewed through the lens of this theory, Wanda's vision becomes the first domino, not the cause of Tony's destiny, but the spark that pushed him to confront the fears already living inside him. That's a subtle difference, yet it makes Wanda feel like an accidental architect of events without taking away Tony's own agency. The final piece of the puzzle is Wanda herself. We last saw events that left her fate uncertain, and Marvel intentionally left room for audiences to wonder what really happened. That's why so many theories continue to appear online. My version imagines that Wanda's story isn't over and that her connection to reality itself could still become important in the future. Whether she returns as a hero seeking redemption, a protector of the multiverse, or simply someone trying to repair the damage caused by impossible powers, her relationship with destiny remains one of the MCU's most fascinating mysteries. And if Marvel ever revisits those visions from Age of Ultron, I think fans everywhere will immediately remember Tony's unfinished battlefield. So after putting every clue together, here's the theory that keeps running through my mind. Steve's vision found its emotional conclusion. Thor's vision reflected Asgard's fate. Natasha's vision connected to her hidden history. Tony's vision, however, still feels open to interpretation. Maybe it already paid off. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe Marvel never intended another answer at all. But imagining that Wanda unknowingly set the Avengers on the paths that define their destinies creates one of the most emotionally satisfying what-if scenarios I've ever considered. And honestly, that's why I love fan theories. They're not about proving the future. They're about looking at familiar stories from a completely different angle and discovering possibilities that make us appreciate those movies even more. If you enjoyed this theory, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear your own ideas, so drop your questions and wildest MCU theories down in the comments. This is Liam Harrison from MovieCast, and thanks for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you in the next theory.